Richard Gere, the man who defined Hollywood romance for an entire generation, the face that launched 1,000 fantasies, the actor who seemed destined to remain forever young in the American imagination, is saying goodbye. But this isn't a retirement announcement or a gentle fade into the sunset. This is something far more profound, more final, more heartbreaking. At 75 years old, Richard Gere is leaving permanently, abandoning the country that made him a star, walking away from Hollywood forever, and making a decision that has shocked even those closest to him. The glossy magazines will tell you it's about love. He's following his Spanish wife to her homeland. The entertainment press will say it's a lifestyle choice. He prefers the European pace, the culture, the sophistication. But the truth is far sadder, far more complicated, and far more human than any simple explanation can capture. What has driven one of the most recognizable actors in the world to leave everything behind? And perhaps most painfully, what is Richard Gere really saying goodbye to? The answers will break your heart. They reveal a story of choices and consequences, of principles that cost everything, of an industry that discards its heroes, of aging in a culture that worships youth, of love found too late and time running out too soon. This is a story about what happens when you fight for what you believe in and lose everything. It's about being forgotten by the very people who once couldn't get enough of you. It's about growing old in a business that only values the young. And it's about looking at the life you've built and realizing you need to leave it all behind. Richard Gere was born on August 31, 1949, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to a middle-class family. His father was an insurance agent, his mother a homemaker. There was nothing in his background that predicted movie stardom. No Hollywood connections, no entertainment industry lineage, just a regular kid from upstate New York where his family moved when he was young. Richard was intellectual, introspective, drawn to philosophy and music. He learned to play multiple instruments and seriously considered a career in music before discovering theater. At the University of Massachusetts Amherst, he studied philosophy for 2 years before dropping out to pursue acting. A decision that would change his life but would also, decades later, leave him questioning everything. His early acting career was in theater, playing in provincial productions and working his way up. He was talented, dedicated, and ambitious, but there were thousands of talented actors. What set Richard apart was something he couldn't control and couldn't take credit for: his looks. Richard Gere was devastatingly handsome. Not just attractive, he had a face that cameras loved, a physical presence that commanded attention, a sensuality that was impossible to ignore. In the late 1970s, as he transitioned from theater to film, Hollywood executives saw what audiences would soon confirm: Richard Gere could be a star. In 1980, Richard Gere starred in American Gigolo, directed by Paul Schrader. Playing Julian Kay, a high-priced male escort in Los Angeles, Richard brought a combination of vulnerability and sexuality that made the film a sensation. The movie was controversial. Its frank depiction of sex work and homosexuality pushed boundaries, but it was also mesmerizing. There's a scene in American Gigolo where Julian lays out his designer clothes on his bed, carefully selecting his outfit. It's a simple moment, but the way Richard played it, with almost ritualistic attention, mixing vanity with something deeper, made it iconic. He wasn't just an actor playing a role, he embodied a new kind of masculinity for cinema. The film made Richard a sex symbol overnight. Women wanted him. Men wanted to be him. His career trajectory changed completely. Suddenly, he was being offered leading roles in major films. Studios were willing to build movies around him. He had achieved what millions of actors dream of: movie star status. But American Gigolo also typecast him in ways he would struggle with for years. He became known for playing smooth, sexual, slightly dangerous characters. The depth and range he wanted to show as an actor was often overlooked in favor of his looks and his sex appeal. He had won, but he had also lost something important. In 1982, Richard almost turned down the role that would define him: Zach Mayo in An Officer and a Gentleman. The script had problems, the character was unlikable, and Richard had concerns about the military setting and the film's politics. But he was persuaded to take it, and the decision would change everything. An Officer and a Gentleman was a massive hit, earning over $190 million worldwide. The final scene, Richard in his navy dress whites, sweeping Deborah Winger into his arms and carrying her out of the factory while Up Where We Belong plays, became one of the most iconic moments in cinema history. It was romance, it was triumph, it was everything audiences wanted from movies. 8 years after An Officer and a Gentleman, Richard Gere starred in Pretty Woman opposite Julia Roberts. The 1990 romantic comedy became a cultural phenomenon, earning $463 million worldwide and making Julia Roberts a star while re-establishing Richard as Hollywood royalty. In the early 1990s, Richard Gere was one of the most bankable stars in the world. He commanded $10 to $15 million per film, appeared on every sexiest man alive type list, and had his pick of roles and leading ladies. He was Hollywood royalty, invited to every important event, courted by every major director, the kind of star that defined an era. After Pretty Woman in 1990, Richard's career entered a long, slow decline. It wasn't immediate, he still got roles throughout the 90s. But the trajectory was unmistakably downward. The films got smaller, the budgets lower, the buzz quieter. By the 2000s, Richard was no longer a leading man in major Hollywood films. Hollywood's ageism affects everyone, but it affects some more than others. For leading men whose appeal was based partly on sex appeal and romance, aging is particularly cruel. Richard was facing the reality that the industry had no use for a 50-something romantic lead, no matter how talented or handsome. In his 50s, Richard was still attractive, still capable of commanding the screen. But Hollywood wanted younger men for romantic leads, wanted action heroes who could do their own stunts, wanted fresh faces that appealed to younger demographics. Richard, for all his talent and star power, was deemed too old. The roles available to aging actors are limited: the mentor, the father figure, the distinguished statesman, the villain. Richard got some of these roles, but they were supporting parts in smaller films. The leading man status he had enjoyed for 2 decades was gone, and it wasn't coming back. By the 2010s, Richard was fighting simply to stay relevant. Hollywood had completely changed. Franchises dominated, superhero films took all the oxygen, adult dramas struggled to get made. Richard's particular strengths as an actor, subtle emotional work, romantic chemistry, sophisticated presence, were increasingly devalued. He tried television, appearing in Mother Father Son, 2019, a BBC series that received mixed reviews and limited viewership. He took roles in films that went straight to streaming or received limited theatrical releases. He was working, but he was no longer the Richard Gere people remembered. The entertainment industry had moved on, and Richard was left behind, not because he lacked talent, but because the industry no longer made the kinds of films he excelled in and because his activism had made him untouchable for major studios. At 75, Richard faces a harsh reality: his career is essentially over. He will never be a leading man again. He will never have a major comeback. His time has passed, and all that's left is small roles in forgettable films or graceful retirement. In 1991, at the height of both their careers, Richard Gere married supermodel Cindy Crawford. She was 25, he was 42. They were one of the most beautiful couples in the world, gracing magazine covers and embodying 90s glamour. But the marriage was troubled from the start. The age gap created fundamental differences in life stage and priorities. Cindy was at the beginning of her supermodel career, enjoying fame and youth. Richard was established, increasingly focused on Buddhism and activism, ready for a different phase of life. They wanted different things. There were also constant rumors about Richard's sexuality, fueled by an urban legend so vicious and persistent that it overshadowed his entire career. More on this later. Cindy found herself constantly defending her husband and their marriage against tabloid speculation. In 1995, they took out a full-page ad in the London Times denying rumors about their relationship, a desperate move that only fed more speculation. By December 1995, they separated, divorcing in 1999. The marriage had lasted 4 years, but the damage, to both of them, lasted much longer. In 2002, Richard married actress Carey Lowell, 16 years his junior. They had been together since 1995 and had a son, Homer James Jigme Gere, in 2000. This marriage seemed more substantial, more grounded. They shared a son, built a life together, seemed genuinely connected. For over a decade, the marriage appeared stable. Homer grew up with both parents present. Richard seemed to have found the domestic happiness that had eluded him with Cindy. But in September 2013, after 11 years of marriage, they separated. What followed was one of Hollywood's messiest and most expensive divorces. The split was acrimonious, with disputes over property, custody, and finances dragging on for years. The divorce wasn't finalized until 2016, 3 years after separation, with settlement negotiations being particularly brutal. The most painful aspect of Richard's divorce from Carey was the battle over their son Homer. Custody disputes are always difficult, but this one was particularly contentious, with both sides fighting for time with their child. Richard, by this point in his 60s, faced the possibility of being separated from his teenage son during crucial developmental years. The court battles, the negotiations, the anger and bitterness, all took a severe toll on him emotionally and psychologically. Friends from this period describe Richard as devastated, struggling with depression, questioning everything. He was losing his son, losing his family, and facing the reality that his second marriage had failed just as his first had. The pattern suggested something deeper. perhaps he was fundamentally incapable of sustaining intimate relationships. The financial terms of Richard's divorce from Carey were staggering. Reports suggested the settlement was worth approximately $100 million, including the division of real estate holdings worth tens of millions, ongoing support payments, and complex financial arrangements. Richard had to sell their $36 million Pound Ridge, New York estate as part of the settlement. Other properties were divided. The fortune he had accumulated over decades of work was substantially diminished. At an age when most people are securing their retirement, Richard was facing significant financial pressure. The divorce also highlighted an uncomfortable reality. Despite being one of the biggest stars of his generation, Richard hadn't maintained the kind of wealth his status suggested. Between taxes, expenses, supporting his family, and his humanitarian work, the money had gone out as fast as it came in. One of Richard's deepest pains is his relationship with Homer, now in his 20s. The divorce meant Richard missed significant portions of his son's teenage years. The time lost can never be recovered. The experiences they didn't share can never be recreated. Richard has spoken occasionally about Homer, always with evident love and pride. But there's also sadness in how he discusses their relationship, a sense of distance, of missed opportunities, of a connection that never quite became what it should have been. Now, with Richard planning to move permanently to Spain, the physical distance between father and son will only increase. Homer is in America, Richard will be in Madrid. The relationship, already strained by divorce, will face new challenges. And Richard, at 75, has to wonder how many more years he has to rebuild what was broken. Richard's commitment to Buddhism has been the most consistent aspect of his life for 5 decades. While marriages failed and careers faltered, his spiritual practice remained constant. He has studied with numerous teachers, gone on extended retreats, and dedicated significant time and resources to Buddhist causes. But has Buddhism actually brought him peace? Looking at Richard's life, the failed marriages, the career struggles, the constant upheaval, it's unclear whether his spiritual practice has provided the serenity it promises. He has the knowledge, the meditation practice, the philosophical framework. But he still suffers, still struggles, still seems to be searching. Richard's friendship with the Dalai Lama has been one of the most important relationships of his life. The Dalai Lama has been teacher, guide, and friend. Their connection is genuine and has profoundly shaped Richard's worldview and choices. But the Dalai Lama's influence has also been costly. It was this relationship that drew Richard into Tibet activism, that led to his political statements, that ultimately contributed to his Hollywood blacklisting. The friendship, however valuable spiritually, has had significant worldly consequences. Now, with the Dalai Lama in his late 80s and in declining health, Richard faces the prospect of losing this crucial relationship. The teacher who has guided him for decades won't be there forever. Another goodbye is coming. Richard has lived a contradiction, trying to be a serious Buddhist practitioner while maintaining a Hollywood career based on vanity, sex appeal, and materialism. Buddhism teaches non-attachment, simplicity, and ego dissolution. Hollywood demands attachment to image, luxury, and ego enhancement. These conflicting values have created internal tension throughout Richard's life. He has vast wealth while preaching about detachment. He plays romantic leads while practicing celibacy during meditation retreats. He lives in luxury while discussing the suffering of the poor. The contradictions are profound and unresolved. Richard has never fully belonged to either the Hollywood world or the spiritual community. He's too Buddhist for Hollywood, too Hollywood for serious spiritual practitioners. This liminal existence has left him somewhat isolated, not quite accepted anywhere, always slightly outside whatever community he's in. The move to Spain might be partly about escaping this liminal space, finding somewhere he can simply be rather than constantly navigating between incompatible worlds. But geography won't resolve the internal contradictions that have defined his life. Despite all his spiritual practice, Richard seems profoundly lonely. He has had friends, lovers, families, but genuine connection has eluded him. The spiritual path, particularly in its more austere Buddhist forms, can be isolating. The insights and perspectives it brings can make relating to others more difficult, not easier. At 75, Richard is still searching for something, peace, meaning, connection, that decades of spiritual practice haven't provided. The search continues, but time is running out. Richard Gere was once considered one of the handsomest men in the world. His looks were a significant part of his success, his appeal, his identity. But time is undefeated, and Richard has had to watch his face and body age while the world watches and comments. He has aged well. At 75, he remains distinguished and attractive. But he's no longer the impossibly beautiful young man from American Gigolo, or the romantic lead from Pretty Woman. The gray hair, the wrinkles, the physical changes, They're all reminders that youth is gone forever. Every public appearance brings scrutiny of Richard's appearance. Photos are analyzed, wrinkles counted, plastic surgery speculated about. The pressure to maintain a youthful appearance in an industry obsessed with youth is immense, and Richard has not been immune to it. He has likely had some cosmetic work done, many actors do. But unlike younger actors who can maintain the fiction of eternal youth, Richard can't hide his age. He's 75, and he looks 75, regardless of any interventions. The handsome leading man is now an elderly gentleman, and the loss of that youth is a kind of death. At 75, health becomes a constant concern. Richard has been relatively fortunate, no major public health crises, but age brings inevitable decline. He's had to deal with injuries, diminished energy, the physical limitations that come with being 3/4 of a century old. Friends have mentioned that Richard is increasingly conscious of his mortality, talking more about death, making plans for his estate, thinking about legacy. This is natural at his age, but it's also sad, the vibrant young actor confronting the reality that his time is limited. Perhaps the cruelest aspect of aging in Hollywood is being forgotten by the very industry that once couldn't get enough of you. Richard attends fewer industry events, gets fewer calls, sees fewer opportunities. New generations of film executives don't remember his films. Younger actors don't know his work. He's become a name from the past, someone older people remember fondly but younger people barely know. His IMDb page is mostly populated by work from decades ago. The Richard Gere of today is invisible compared to the Richard Gere of 1990. Richard has watched as almost everyone from his era has either retired, died, or faded from relevance. The Hollywood he knew, the studio system that made adult dramas, the theatrical experience that defined cinema, has been replaced by something unrecognizable. His contemporaries are largely gone from leading roles. The directors he worked with have retired or passed away. The kind of films he made no longer get theatrical releases. An entire era of Hollywood has ended, and Richard is one of the last remnants, a survivor of a bygone age. In 2014, Richard met Alejandra Silva, a Spanish publicist and activist. She was 32, he was 65, a 33-year age gap that raised eyebrows. But the connection was real. Alejandra shared Richard's interest in humanitarian causes and spirituality. They bonded over Buddhism and social justice work. In 2018, they married in a small ceremony. For Richard, it was a third chance at marriage, another opportunity to get it right. For Alejandra, it was marriage to one of the most famous actors in the world, but also to a man old enough to be her grandfather. The relationship has lasted longer than many predicted. Alejandra has brought Richard joy, companionship, and 2 more sons. But the age difference is inescapable and will only become more significant as Richard continues to age. Richard and Alejandra have 2 sons together, Alexander, born in 2019 when Richard was 69, and another son born in 2020 when Richard was 70. Becoming a father in your 70s is rare and creates unique challenges. The joy is genuine. Richard has spoken movingly about his young sons, about the happiness they bring, about being given another chance at fatherhood. But the reality is sobering. Richard will be 88 when Alexander turns 18. He may not live to see his youngest sons graduate high school, let alone college or marriage or fatherhood of their own. Friends close to Richard say he's torn between joy at his young family and fear about his mortality. He loves his sons desperately but worries constantly about how much time he has with them. Every birthday is a reminder that he's getting older while they're just beginning. There's also guilt about potentially leaving another child with an absent father, guilt about bringing children into the world when he might not be there to raise them, guilt about the age gap and what it might mean for their development. The age gap between Richard and Alejandra is one of the largest in celebrity marriages. When he's 80, she'll be 47. When he's 90, if he lives that long, she'll be 57. The mathematics are stark and unavoidable. Alejandra has said the age difference doesn't matter, that they're connected on a deeper level. But aging is relentless, and Richard will become increasingly elderly while Alejandra remains middle-aged. The caretaking will eventually become one-sided. The partnership will transform into something else. Despite the challenges, Richard has built a new family in Madrid. He has Alejandra, their 2 young sons, and Alejandra's son from a previous relationship. It's a third chance at domestic happiness, and Richard is clearly trying to make it work. But there's something bittersweet about starting over at 75. This is his last chance. There won't be a 4th marriage, a 5th family. This has to work, or he'll spend his final years alone. The pressure is immense. In early 2024, Richard announced he was leaving the United States permanently to live in Madrid, Spain, with Alejandra and their young sons. The announcement shocked fans and the entertainment industry. Richard Gere, quintessentially American actor, was abandoning America. The move wasn't sudden. Richard had been spending increasing time in Spain since marrying Alejandra. But making it permanent, selling his American properties, establishing Spanish residency, these were final acts, irreversible decisions. Richard has cited several reasons for the move: wanting to live in Alejandra's home country, giving their son's connection to Spanish culture and family, preferring European lifestyle and values. All of these are true, but they don't tell the complete story. The move to Spain is also about escape, from a Hollywood that has no use for him, from an America he no longer recognizes, from a life that hasn't turned out as he hoped. It's easier to start fresh somewhere new than to confront failure in the place where you were once celebrated. Madrid offers Richard several things he couldn't find in America: privacy, he's less recognizable in Spain, a different pace of life, a culture that respects age rather than worships youth, and most importantly, distance from the Hollywood industry that rejected him. In Madrid, Richard isn't Richard Gere, the has-been movie star. He's just an American retiree living with his Spanish wife. The anonymity is liberating after decades of fame. He can walk streets without being recognized, live without constant scrutiny, simply exist. America is the country that gave Richard everything: his career, his wealth, his fame. But it's also the country that took it all away, that discarded him when he became inconvenient, that forgot him as soon as newer stars emerged. Leaving America is Richard's way of saying goodbye to all of that: the success and the failure, the triumphs and the humiliations, the dreams and the disappointments. It's a clean break, a chance to live his final years without constant reminders of what he was and what he's lost. Richard leaving America has symbolic weight beyond personal choice. He's one of the most prominent Americans to permanently relocate to Europe in recent years. His departure feels like a rejection not just of Hollywood but of America itself, its values, its culture, its trajectory. In interviews, Richard has been critical of American politics, culture wars, and social division. The move to Spain is partly political, choosing a country with universal healthcare, different values, a more European sensibility. It's a statement about what America has become and why he can no longer live there. At 75, Richard faces the health realities that come with age. His metabolism has slowed. His energy is diminished. Recovery from injuries takes longer. The body that once made him a sex symbol is betraying him with normal aging processes that are nonetheless devastating for someone whose identity was tied to physical perfection. Richard can no longer do many of the physical activities that once defined him. The martial arts training from an officer and a gentleman, the physical work required for film roles, the high-energy lifestyle, all are increasingly difficult or impossible. He's dealt with various injuries over the years, some from film work, some from simply being active into his 70s. Each injury heals more slowly, leaves more lasting damage. The cumulative effect is a body that works less well with each passing year. Richard has been notably private about his health, rarely discussing specific issues beyond general aging. But friends and observers have noticed signs of decline. Moving more slowly, appearing tired more often, canceling appearances. There have been unconfirmed reports of various health scares, nothing life-threatening made public, but concerning nonetheless. At 75, any health issue carries more risk. A minor problem can become major. A temporary setback can become permanent. Richard has lost numerous friends and colleagues over recent years. Fellow actors from his generation have died, some from illness, some from accidents, all reminders of mortality. Each death hits harder, makes his own mortality more real, more immediate. The loss of friends also means loss of the people who knew him when, who remembered his prime, who understood what it was like to be young and successful in 1980s Hollywood. With each death, more of Richard's past disappears. At 75, mortality isn't abstract, it's imminent. Richard knows he likely has less time ahead than behind. Even with good health and longevity in his family, he's in the final chapter of his life. Every day could be one of his lasts. This awareness shapes everything: his decision to move to Spain, his relationship with his young sons, his urgency about humanitarian work, his willingness to say goodbye to America. Time is running out, and Richard is trying to make what remains count. In 2019, Richard starred in Mother, Father, Son, a BBC series about a media mogul and his troubled family. It was intended as a prestige project, a chance for Richard to showcase his dramatic range in the golden age of television. The series received mixed reviews and failed to find an audience. Critics praised some aspects of Richard's performance but found the series itself pretentious and overwrought. It came and went with minimal cultural impact, barely remembered even by people who watched it. The failure was particularly disappointing because TV was supposed to be Richard's pathway to career revival. With film roles scarce, television offered opportunities for serious actors to do substantial work. but even that door seems to be closing. In his 70s, Richard has had to actively campaign for roles rather than having them offered to him. He takes meetings, reads for parts, competes with other aging actors for limited opportunities. The indignity of it, one of the biggest stars of his generation having to audition and plead for work, is profound. He's taken roles in low-budget independent films that barely get released, done voice work, accepted supporting parts in projects he would have turned down in his prime. The work keeps him active, gives him purpose, but it's a far cry from his leading man days. Hollywood's ageism isn't subtle. Richard is simply too old for most roles. Romantic leads? Those go to actors in their 30s and 40s.
Action heroes?
Too physically demanding.
Prestige dramas?
Those are designed for younger actors. What's left are character parts, cameos, and roles defined entirely by age. Being too old in Hollywood means being written off, considered unemployable, seen as a relic. It doesn't matter how talented you are or how respected you once were. Age disqualifies you from contention. Richard has faced this reality repeatedly. Richard has pivoted to independent films and passion projects. Smaller movies that allow artistic freedom but reach minimal audiences. These films sometimes showcase his talents but often languish unseen, premiering at minor film festivals before disappearing. He's done these projects for scale, essentially working for free, because he loves acting and wants to stay active. But there's something sad about watching one of the highest-paid actors of his generation working for nothing in films nobody sees. The roles Richard wants, complex, dramatic, meaningful, go to younger actors or to his contemporaries who didn't alienate major studios with political activism. He's effectively blacklisted not just from China but from Hollywood itself, deemed too controversial and too old to be worth the trouble. Every major role that goes to someone else is a reminder of what Richard has lost. Every film he's passed over for is evidence that Hollywood has moved on. The industry that made him a star has no further use for him. One of the most damaging and persistent rumors in Hollywood history involves Richard Gere and a gerbil. The story, utterly false and viciously cruel, alleges a bizarre sexual practice that supposedly landed Richard in the emergency room. The rumor has been definitively debunked numerous times, but it refuses to die. The origins of the rumor are murky, possibly dating back to the 1970s or early 1980s. It gained widespread circulation in the pre-internet era through word of mouth, becoming one of those everyone knows stories despite having zero factual basis. No hospital records, no witnesses, no evidence. Nothing but a vicious lie. The gerbil rumor has followed Richard for over 4 decades. It's been referenced in comedy routines, discussed in tabloids, mentioned in gossip columns, and whispered about at Hollywood parties. Despite being completely false, it has shaped public perception of Richard, adding a layer of mockery and humiliation to his public image. For Richard, the rumor has been devastating. It's a lie he can't fully escape, can't definitively kill, can't sue away. Addressing it only gives it oxygen. Ignoring it allows it to persist. There's no winning move, only endurance. Living with a false but persistent sexual rumor for decades takes a severe psychological toll. Richard has had to endure whispers, jokes, and innuendo about something that never happened. His dignity has been assaulted, his reputation damaged, his sexuality questioned, all based on a complete fabrication. The rumor likely contributed to the failure of his first marriage. How could Cindy Crawford not be affected by constant speculation about her husband's sexuality and alleged bizarre practices? The rumor created doubt, suspicion, and stress that poisoned their relationship. At 75, Richard has lived with the gerbil rumor for most of his adult life. New generations discover it online, where it has achieved immortality through endless repetition on websites and social media. He will never escape it. When he dies, obituaries will likely reference it, perpetuating the lie even in death. The cruelty of the rumor, its complete falseness combined with its staying power, represents one of the darkest aspects of fame. Richard's actual accomplishments, his humanitarian work, his artistic contributions, all are overshadowed by a vicious lie that won't die. The gerbil rumor has done permanent damage to Richard's reputation and legacy. People who know nothing else about him know the rumor. It's become more famous than many of his films. The damage is irreversible, embedded in popular culture forever. Richard has handled it with dignity, rarely addressing it, refusing to give it more attention. But the pain must be immense, being defined by a lie, being mocked for something that never happened, having your legacy tainted by pure fiction. Richard's divorce from Carey Lowell was financially catastrophic. The $100 million settlement, combined with legal fees and the costs of maintaining separate households, substantially depleted his wealth. At an age when he should have been financially secure, he faced real economic pressure. The divorce coincided with his career decline, meaning his earning power was greatly diminished just as his expenses exploded. He couldn't command $15 million per film anymore. He was taking whatever work he could get, often for scale or modest fees. Richard has financial obligations to multiple families: his ex-wife Carey and their son Homer, his current wife Alejandra and their 2 young sons, plus Alejandra's son from her previous relationship. Supporting all these people, while his income has declined, creates real strain. He also maintains multiple properties, employs staff, and funds his humanitarian foundation. The expenses are enormous while the revenue has shrunk dramatically. The mathematics are challenging even for someone who earned hundreds of millions during his career peak. Richard has been selling properties, a clear sign of financial pressure. The $36 million Pound Ridge estate was sold as part of the divorce settlement. Other properties have been quietly sold or are on the market. Each sale represents another piece of his former life being liquidated. The move to Spain is also financially motivated. Living in Madrid is substantially cheaper than maintaining a lifestyle in New York or Los Angeles. European living costs, especially outside major capitals, are more manageable for someone whose income has declined. Richard went from being worth an estimated $120 million at his peak to facing real financial concerns in his 70s. He's not poor, he still has substantial assets, but he's no longer wealthy enough to live without thinking about money, and that represents a significant decline. The stress of financial pressure at 75, when he should be securely retired, adds to his burdens. He worries about supporting his young sons through adulthood, about having enough money to last through what could be another 10 to 20 years of life, about maintaining the lifestyle his family expects. The public sees Richard Gere the movie star, assumes he's still fabulously wealthy, imagines a life of unlimited luxury. The reality is more constrained, not poverty, but not the boundless wealth people imagine either. This gap between perception and reality is its own burden. Richard can't admit financial struggles without losing dignity, can't ask for help without admitting failure, can't downsize lifestyle without it being seen as humiliating. He's trapped by the expectations of what a movie star's life should look like. Richard has devoted enormous time, money, and energy to Tibet activism since the 1980s. He founded the Gere Foundation to support Tibetan refugees and culture. He's met with political leaders, testified before Congress, organized fundraisers, and used every platform to advocate for Tibetan independence. But after 4 decades, Tibet remains occupied. The situation has arguably worsened, not improved. China's control has tightened. International support has waned. Richard's efforts, however well-intentioned, haven't achieved their goal. The Gere Foundation has done valuable work, supporting education, healthcare, and cultural preservation for Tibetan refugees. But it's also struggled with funding, especially as Richard's own wealth has declined and as Tibet has fallen off the international radar. Running a foundation requires constant fundraising, administration, and political navigation. Richard has devoted countless hours to this work, often at the expense of his career and personal life. The opportunity cost has been enormous. Richard's activism cost him his Hollywood career, cost him hundreds of millions in lost earnings, cost him relationships and opportunities. The price was almost unimaginably high.
And what did it achieve? Tibet is still occupied.
China is more powerful than ever. The Dalai Lama is aging without a clear succession plan. International attention has moved on to other causes. Richard sacrificed his career for a cause that has not succeeded, and that failure must haunt him. The hardest part of activism is when results don't come despite decades of effort. Richard has worked for Tibet for over 40 years. He's given speeches, organized events, donated money, used his fame to raise awareness. But the outcome he sought, Tibetan independence or at least autonomy, is further away than ever. How does someone reconcile that? How do you live with having sacrificed everything for a cause that failed? Richard has to find meaning in the effort itself, in the moral rightness of the cause, because concrete results never materialized. Tibet activism hasn't just been part of Richard's life, it has consumed his life, defined his choices, shaped his trajectory. His identity is now inseparable from the cause. He is Richard Gere the Tibet activist, perhaps more than Richard Gere the actor. But at 75, living in Spain, far from Tibet and from the center of political power, what can he still accomplish? The cause that consumed his life continues, but his ability to affect it diminishes. He spent his life fighting, and the fight is essentially lost. Homer Gere is now in his mid-20s, raised largely by his mother after the divorce. Richard's relationship with Homer has been complicated by divorce, distance, and Richard's other commitments. The bond that could have existed was damaged by circumstances and choices. Homer has grown up with a famous father, but not necessarily a present one. Richard tried to be involved, But the realities of shared custody, work obligations, and eventually moving to Spain created physical and emotional distance that's hard to overcome. Divorce always affects children, but the Gere Lowell divorce was particularly contentious. Homer was caught in the middle of a bitter dispute between parents who couldn't stand each other. The lawyers, the courts, the fighting, all of it damaged Homer's relationship with both parents, but especially with Richard. As Homer became an adult, he had to decide what kind of relationship he wanted with his father. The details remain private, but observers note that Homer maintains distance, suggesting wounds that haven't healed. Richard's sons with Alejandra, Alexander and his younger brother, represent Richard's final chance at fatherhood. He's trying to do it better this time, to be more present, more engaged, more emotionally available. But he's also 75, tired, and facing the reality that he won't be there for most of their lives. The boys are currently very young, still in that stage where having a father around, any father, is enough. But as they grow older, the age gap will become more apparent. Richard will be elderly while they're still children, very old while they're teenagers, possibly gone before they reach adulthood. The question haunts Richard: will he live to see his youngest sons grow up? Statistically, it's unlikely he'll see them graduate college. He might not even see them finish high school. Every milestone will be shadowed by the awareness that it might be the last. This creates pressure to make every moment count, to be fully present, to create enough memories in limited time. But it also creates anxiety, sadness about all the experiences he'll miss, guilt about bringing children into the world when he can't guarantee he'll be there to raise them. Richard's father was reportedly distant, not particularly emotionally available. Richard repeated that pattern with Homer, being too focused on career and activism to be fully present. Now he has 2 more sons, and he fears repeating the pattern again, not through choice but through death. The guilt is profound. Has he condemned another generation of Gere children to growing up without a father, just as he grew up without a truly present father? The cycle continues, and Richard is powerless to stop it beyond the years he has left. Richard's Hollywood friendships have largely faded. The inner circle from his prime years, other actors, directors, producers, has scattered. Some have died, some have retired, most have simply moved on. The relationships built during intense work periods didn't survive the passage of time. Hollywood friendships are often transactional, based on mutual career benefit rather than genuine connection. As Richard's career declined, so did many of his industry relationships. People stopped calling when they couldn't benefit from the association. Julia Roberts, Richard's co-star in Pretty Woman and Runaway Bride, was once close to him. Their on-screen chemistry reflected genuine affection and friendship. But over the years, they've drifted apart, rarely seen together, no longer in regular contact. Julia's career continued to flourish while Richard's declined. She remained A-list, he didn't. The divergent trajectories created natural distance. There's no scandal, no falling out, just the slow drift that comes when lives move in different directions. Richard and Sylvester Stallone were contemporaries, both rising to fame in the late 1970s and dominating 1980s cinema. They ran in similar circles, attended the same events, shared mutual friends. But their friendship, like many in Hollywood, didn't survive changing times. Stallone continued to work consistently, found new success with franchises, remained relevant. Richard didn't. The difference in their career trajectories created distance. When they see each other now, there's warmth but also the awkwardness of people whose lives have diverged dramatically. Richard has outlasted most of his contemporaries in terms of still being alive and active, but that longevity brings loneliness. The people who knew him when are largely gone. The Hollywood he knew doesn't exist anymore. He's a survivor, but survival can be isolating. At industry events, when Richard attends, he's often among the oldest people there. Younger actors and executives don't know his work. His references fall flat. He's a relic from another time, tolerated but not truly welcomed. The loneliness of that position is profound. Strip away the professional relationships, the transactional friendships, the people who knew him when he was useful. Who's actually left? Who are Richard's true friends, the people who would be there if he needed them? The answer appears to be very few people, perhaps almost none. His family, Alejandra and his young sons, seem to be his primary relationships now. The Hollywood friendships have faded. The activist circle has its own priorities. Richard, at 75, is largely alone despite having been famous and connected for 50 years. Richard's stated reasons for moving to Spain, following Alejandra, cultural opportunities for their sons, lifestyle preferences, are true but incomplete. The deeper reasons are more painful and complex. Spain offers escape from a Hollywood that rejected him, from an America he no longer recognizes, from memories of failure and loss. It's easier to start fresh somewhere new than to remain where every street corner holds reminders of what was and what's been lost. Richard has become increasingly critical of American politics and society. He's expressed concern about political division, social regression, and the direction of the country. For someone who came of age in the idealistic 1960s, modern America represents a betrayal of those ideals. The move to Spain is partly political, choosing a country with different values, universal healthcare, less gun violence, more social support. Richard is voting with his feet, rejecting America by leaving it. Madrid offers Richard something he couldn't find in America: relative anonymity. He's less recognizable in Spain, can live more privately, enjoys peace that constant recognition prevents in America. For someone who's been famous for 50 years, this anonymity is deeply appealing. Safety is also a factor. Richard has expressed concerns about violence in America: gun violence, political violence, social instability. Spain feels safer, more stable, less chaotic. For raising young children, this matters. Richard achieved the American dream. Poor kid makes it big, becomes rich and famous, lives the life millions dream of. But the dream failed him in the end. It promised that success would bring happiness, that fame would bring fulfillment, that wealth would solve problems. None of it was true. The American dream also extracted a price. His principles cost him his career, his marriages failed, his children grew up distant, his fame became a burden, his wealth was depleted. He got everything he was promised and discovered it wasn't enough. The move to Spain is final. Richard has sold most of his American properties. He's establishing permanent residency in Spain. This isn't a temporary relocation or splitting time between countries. It's a complete departure from America and from Hollywood. At 75, this is Richard's last move. He won't return to America permanently. He won't resurrect his Hollywood career. This is his final chapter, and he's chosen to live it far from the place that made and unmade him. What will Richard Gere's legacy actually be? Pretty Woman will likely be his most enduring work, the film that future generations will know him from.
But is that all?
Is a romantic comedy from 1990 the sum total of a 50-year career? His Tibet activism will be part of his legacy, though it's unclear how history will judge it, as noble principle or quixotic tilting at windmills. His other films, his performances, his contributions to cinema. Will they be remembered or forgotten? The gerbil rumor will unfortunately be part of his legacy too, a vicious lie that achieved immortality through repetition. Richard's actual accomplishments may be overshadowed by a fabrication, which is perhaps the cruelest irony of his life. Richard has expressed regret about roles he turned down, opportunities that went to other actors and became iconic. The specific roles vary in different interviews, but the regret is consistent. He made choices that seemed right at the time but proved costly in retrospect. He also regrets roles he took for the wrong reasons: fear factor jobs, paychecks rather than passion, compromises that damaged his artistic integrity. The career that looked so successful from outside was filled with choices he wishes he could undo. Every significant choice Richard made had costs. Choosing activism over career advancement cost him hundreds of millions and his Hollywood status. Choosing to marry Cindy Crawford and Carey Lowell cost him eventually in messy divorces. Choosing to have children late in life means he likely won't see them grow up. Every choice extracted a price. Could he have chosen differently? Absolutely. Could he have kept his political views private and maintained his career?
Probably.
But then he wouldn't have been true to himself, and that has its own costs. Richard is living with the consequences of his choices, for better and worse. The central question of Richard's life: was it worth it? Was standing up for Tibet worth losing his career? Was maintaining his principles worth hundreds of millions of dollars in lost earnings? Was being true to himself worth the exile and obscurity? Richard's public answer is always yes. Some things are more important than money or career. Integrity matters more than success. But in private moments, does he ever wonder? Does he ever calculate what his life would have been if he'd stayed silent, kept working, remained Hollywood royalty? The question may not have a clear answer. The costs were real and substantial. But the alternative, selling out his principles for career advancement, would have its own costs to his soul and self-respect. There was no path without sacrifice. The ultimate price of being Richard Gere, achieving everything the culture says matters: beauty, wealth, fame, success, and discovering none of it brings happiness or meaning. Working for 50 years and ending up leaving the country that gave you everything because staying has become unbearable. Being Richard Gere means living with constant contradiction. Buddhist teaching detachment while being famous, preaching simplicity while living in luxury, advocating for justice while being powerless to achieve it, having everything and having nothing simultaneously. Richard's life in Madrid is more modest than his former Hollywood existence. He lives in a nice apartment but not a mansion. He enjoys relative anonymity. He spends time with his young family. He's attempting normal life after decades of abnormality. But adjustment is difficult. Learning a new language at 75 is challenging. Adapting to different culture, different pace, different everything, it's hard. The romance of living in Europe confronts the reality of being an elderly expat far from everything familiar. Spain has excellent healthcare, but Richard's advanced age requires constant medical monitoring. Regular checkups, screenings, managing age-related conditions, these are now central to his life. Every doctor's visit carries the possibility of bad news. He's also far from America, the sad reason Richard Gere is saying goodbye.